You know that feeling when you are standing on the edge of a diving board?
Oh, yeah. You're just staring down at the water.
Exactly. And you keep telling yourself, well, I'm just waiting for the wind to die down. Or, I'll jump as soon as the sun comes out from behind that cloud.
Right, but you just stand there.
Yeah. And eventually, you just climb back down the ladder. We all do this, honestly, but not just at the pool. I mean, we do this with our lives.
100% we do.
You have that one project or maybe a big career pivot or like a
Yeah.
really difficult conversation you need to have, and you just tell yourself you are just waiting for the right time.
It is a super comforting narrative. Like in the moment, standing on that metaphorical diving board, you don't feel like you are avoiding anything. You convince yourself you are being strategic, you know?
That's right. You feel smart.
Exactly. You feel like you're just waiting for optimal conditions.
But looking through the massive stack of research we have for today's deep dive, there is a statistic that completely shatters that illusion.
It really does.
Out of all the people surveyed who say they are, quote, waiting for the right time to make a change, only 3% ever actually put a date on the calendar. Just 3%.
That is just wild.
And for the people who describe themselves as about to start, the data shows the majority of them have been stuck in that exact about to start phase for over a year.
Yeah, it forces a pretty uncomfortable look in the mirror. Because what the psychological data is showing us is that the human brain actually treats waiting as a form of safety.
Wow.
Even when waiting is the exact thing jeopardizing your long-term goals, your brain prefers it. That mythical moment that finally feels right, it almost never arrives organically.
So our mission today for you, the listener, is to pull apart the neuroscience and the psychology behind why our brains trick us into this holding pattern.
We really need to look at the hidden compounding costs of constantly saying, not yet.
Yeah, and most importantly, how to break this paralysis loop without needing the stars to perfectly align first. Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
Because whether it is putting off writing a book or delaying a move to a new city or just, waiting to launch a side hustle, this wait and watch mistake is a trap almost everyone falls into.
And the reason it is such an effective trap is because of how incredibly well it disguises itself. The wait and watch mistake rarely looks like laziness.
Right, like you're not just sitting on the couch.
Exactly. If you were just sitting there doing nothing, you would realize you were procrastinating. Instead, it disguises itself as responsibility. It looks like meticulous preparation. It feels like patience.
I see the visible signs of this all the time, honestly, even in myself, is that endless research phase.
Oh, the research phase is a big one.
You buy like 4 different books on a topic, but you don't actually implement any of the advice, or your start date keeps sliding. First it's next week, then it's after the holidays, then it's, well, when things slow down at work.
Right. But the sources also dive into these hidden internal signs that are much more physical.
Like what kind of physical signs?
Well, they are fascinating because they reveal what your nervous system is actually doing. It is that sudden, tight feeling in your chest when someone brings up the project you have been delaying.
Yes, I know that feeling.
Or it is the habit of rapidly changing the subject when a friend asks how your new business idea is coming along. But the most telling hidden sign, and the one that usually surprises people the most, is that private, unspoken feeling of relief every time a new excuse to delay magically appears.
I have absolutely felt that. It's almost shameful.
It really is.
You find a flaw in your own plan or a sudden crisis at work pops up, and internally you just sigh with relief because it means you are off the hook for today. You don't have to face the discomfort of starting.
Exactly.
But let me push back a little here because I am struggling with the line between avoidance and just being a responsible adult. Like, if I want to quit my job and start a bakery, I shouldn't just impulsively walk out today with no savings, right? Some waiting has to be necessary.
What's fascinating here is how the psychological research draws a very hard, observable line between genuine preparation and avoidance.
Okay, how so?
They look identical on the surface, but the mechanics are entirely different. Genuine preparation has a defined, measurable endpoint. You are waiting to hit a specific milestone, like saving a 3-month financial cushion before you quit.
Right, so you know when you're done.
Yes, once you hit that number, you act. Waiting for the right time, however, has no endpoint. There is always one more variable that could theoretically make the timing better, one more book to read, one more market trend to analyze.
I have always thought of it like packing a suitcase for a trip. You are folding the shirts, you're checking the weather at your destination, you are meticulously buying the travel-size toothpaste.
Yeah, just constantly packing.
And you do this every single day for months. But you never actually walk out the front door and go to the airport.
Mm.
At a certain point, no matter how nicely those shirts are folded, you aren't packing anymore. You are actively avoiding the uncertainty of leaving the house.
That perfectly captures the illusion of progress. You are expending energy on the idea of the trip to avoid the reality of the trip.
Which is exhausting.
It totally is, and their research highlights that the reasons we avoid that reality evolve significantly as we move through different decades of our lives.
Walk me through that.
Yeah.
Because the sources break this down by age, and it seems like the flavor of our waiting changes completely depending on what stage of life we are in.
Let's start with your 20s. In that decade, you're generally still trying to solidify your identity. So the wait and watch pattern typically manifests as waiting to feel confident.
Like you need to feel like an expert already.
Exactly. You hold off on applying for a stretch job, or you stay quiet in a high-stakes meeting because you incorrectly believe that confidence is a prerequisite for action. You are waiting to feel ready.
But then you hit that 28 to 35 range, and the tone of the research gets a lot heavier. The sources describe this window as a convergence of major life pressures.
Oh, absolutely.
You've got career expectations, relationship milestones, financial realities, all hitting at once.
And when you are carrying that much psychological weight, your mind enters a protective mode. It is trying to shield you from adding one more potential failure to an already full plate.
That makes total sense.
Right. So if you want to make a big pivot during those years, waiting suddenly feels like the only safe option. The stakes just feel too high to experiment. It is important to understand that your mind isn't broken when it does this. It is just triaging real pressure, often without the necessary cognitive tools to process it.
Moving into the 35 to 45 demographic, the research notes that our behavioral patterns have really had time to calcify. Change objectively feels harder because we have built a life around our current routines.
Which is a very real hurdle.
But I was relieved to see the neuroscience data showing that neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself, it remains incredibly robust. This wait and watch habit isn't baked into your DNA, it is a learned stress response, which means it can be unlearned.
Which brings us to 45 and beyond. The sources note a shift here toward a quiet fear that the window of opportunity has simply closed. People tell themselves it is too late to start over.
Yeah, that ship has sailed mentality.
But the developmental psychologists push back hard on this. They point out that some of the most durable, powerful mindset shifts happen after 45, precisely because by that point, the why behind your goals is clearer than it ever was in your youth.
Wait, really?
Yeah, you aren't chasing societal approval anymore. You are chasing intrinsic meaning. You just have to navigate past that initial block of feeling like you have run out of time.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because to navigate past that block, we have to look under the hood at the hard science of the brain. If endless waiting is actually sabotaging us, why did our brain prefer it so much?
Right. The biology of it all.
The sources talk a lot about the amygdala and our built-in threat detection system. I always thought that was just for physical danger, like jumping out of the way of a speeding car.
Well, your amygdala is essentially your brain's alarm system, and you are right, it evolved to keep you physically alive. But in modern life, the brain processes psychological uncertainty using the exact same neural pathways it uses for physical danger.
That's wild.
Starting something new is, by definition, stepping into the unknown. You don't know if you will fail, if you will lose money, or if you will be publicly embarrassed. Your amygdala registers that uncertainty not as an opportunity, but as a severe vulnerability.
So when I sit down to finally write that business plan, and I suddenly feel the urge to go clean my entire kitchen instead, that's not just me being easily distracted.
Not at all.
That is my survival instinct misfiring, trying to steer me away from a perceived threat.
Precisely. Your brain is nudging you back toward the familiar because the familiar is mathematically safe. You survived yesterday, so doing the exact same thing today is a guaranteed survival strategy in the eyes of your nervous system.
Okay, wow.
Waiting feels like staying inside the cave where it is warm and safe. Starting feels like stepping out into the dark forest.
This creates what the institutional research calls the paralysis loop. The waiting teams up with other cognitive distortions. It teams up with perfectionism, where you say you will start when your skills are flawless.
Yeah, the classic crap.
It also teams up with people-pleasing, where you wait for everyone in your life to validate your choice. The Stanford University research on this blew my mind. They studied something called the intention behavior gap.
That is the measurable space between what we genuinely plan to do and what we actually execute. The Stanford researchers found that this gap widens significantly whenever a decision feels reversible or open-ended.
Wait, I need you to explain that. Why does having options make us less likely to act? Shouldn't flexibility be a good thing?
In theory, yes. But in practice, your brain is constantly triaging cognitive load. When you give yourself a soft deadline, like saying, oh, I'll try to launch the website sometime this fall, your brain categorizes that task as non-threatening and non-urgent.
So it just gets ignored.
Exactly. It gets indefinitely pushed to the bottom of the priority list because the immediate demands of your day will always feel more urgent. Essentially, your brain treats a soft deadline as no deadline at all, preserving its energy for immediate fires.
That concept of preserving energy ties directly into the Harvard University research on decision fatigue. They found that every day you delay making a decision, you aren't actually saving mental energy. You are spending it.
It is a constant drain.
I kept thinking about it like an unmade decision is a background app on your smartphone. You aren't actively looking at the app. You might not even realize it is open, but it is quietly running in the background, pinging servers and draining your mental battery down to 1% while you are just trying to go about your normal day.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that constant background battery drain perfectly explains the research from the American Psychological Association regarding avoidance behavior.
Okay, how so?
They map out how avoidance creates a vicious, self-reinforcing cycle. When you avoid a scary task, you get a tiny, immediate hit of relief. Your brain logs that relief as a successful survival tactic.
So by avoiding the task, I am accidentally training my brain to fear it more.
Exactly. It is like paving a detour road. Every time you take the detour instead of the main road, your brain paves the detour a little thicker and lets the main road get more overgrown.
Oh, I love that analogy.
The next time you face the project, your nervous system is even more sensitized to it. The eventual starting point becomes exponentially scarier than it was originally, entirely because of the avoidance.
And we are living in an environment that is basically engineered to facilitate that avoidance. I mean, the sources dig into dopamine dysregulation from our devices.
Oh, phones are the ultimate escape hatch.
Right. If I feel that spike of anxiety about starting my project, I don't have to sit with that discomfort. I can just pick up my phone, scroll a feed for 10 minutes, and instantly flood my brain with dopamine.
You get the chemical reward of having done something without actually doing anything.
Yes. It completely short-circuits the motivation required for long-term, high-effort goals.
It creates a perfect storm for paralysis. Your brain is terrified of the uncertainty, your devices offer an instant escape hatch, and your mental battery is drained from the unmade decisions. Which is why we spin these elaborate narratives, these myths, to justify why we are still waiting.
I want to break down these myths because reading this section of the research was a huge wake-up call for me. I realized I was actively believing things about motivation that are biologically false.
A lot of people do.
For instance, the idea that motivation has to precede action. I always thought I needed to wake up feeling incredibly inspired before I can tackle a massive project.
That is perhaps the most common and honestly most damaging myth. The neurochemical reality is that motivation almost always follows action. It doesn't precede it.
It feels so backwards, though.
I know, but dopamine, which drives motivation, is released in response to making progress, even tiny progress. If you sit around waiting for a spontaneous lightning bolt of motivation to strike before you start, you will likely be waiting forever. Action generates the momentum.
Okay, here is another myth I fall for all the time. If starting feels incredibly hard and full of friction, it must mean I'm making the wrong decision. Like I take the difficulty as a sign from the universe that I should stop.
Right. The universe is telling you no. But neuroscience completely debunks the idea that difficulty equals wrongness. Almost any unfamiliar action activates cognitive friction in the brain simply because it lacks established neural pathways.
So it's just growing pains.
Exactly. Difficulty at the starting line is not reliable evidence about whether the goal itself is correct for you. It is literally just your brain resisting the metabolic cost of doing something new.
And the third major myth. Once my external conditions improve, starting will feel easier. Once the kids are back in school or once I get this promotion, then I'll have the bandwidth.
But as we just discussed with the amygdala, the emotional resistance to starting is rarely about your external calendar. It is internal.
It's the uncertainty response again.
Exactly. It is the fundamental uncertainty response. So when the kids go back to school or you get the promotion, those new conditions will typically just present a brand new version of the exact same internal resistance. The excuse changes, but the paralysis remains.
This mechanism becomes so clear when you look at the real-life case studies provided in the sources. I was particularly struck by Sarah's story. Sarah is 31, and for 3 years she wanted to start a small online business.
Right, the e-commerce one.
Yeah, she would research e-commerce platforms, get super excited, build a spreadsheet, and then, well, nothing. She kept telling herself she needed more savings to do it right, or she needed to take one more marketing course.
Her turning point is incredibly relatable because it was so mundane. She realized on an ordinary Tuesday evening that she had bookmarked the exact same how to start an online business article twice. And those bookmarks were 8 months apart. That was the moment her illusion of preparation shattered. She realized she wasn't researching, she was just orbiting the decision, trapped in its gravitational pull without ever landing.
So how did she break out of orbit? Because she didn't magically find an extra $10,000 in savings or sudden unshakable confidence.
No, she utilized a tactic we will discuss more in a moment. She set a strict 2-week decision deadline. Not a goal to build the whole business, but a deadline to make a binary choice.
Just yes or no.
Right. Either she published a single functioning web page within 14 days, or she was going to consciously let the dream go and stop letting it drain her background battery.
And she actually did it. She published a single, imperfect product page. It had a shaky brand voice, a half-finished bio, and it wasn't the flawless Apple-style launch she had dreamed of for 3 years.
But it was real.
Exactly. By forcing an imperfect start, she broke the avoidance loop.
The sources contrast Sarah with Michael, who is 43. He was a mid-level corporate manager who was putting off asking for a promotion he demonstrably deserved.
Yeah, I remember reading about him.
For over a year, he kept waiting for a better quarter or a more stable economic climate. But underneath all those rational-sounding calendar excuses, he was hiding a deeply personal fear. He was terrified that if he asked and was told no, it would permanently confirm his worst anxiety, that he had plateaued and his career was essentially over.
And he only broke his holding pattern after a junior colleague got the exact promotion he had been eyeing. The pain of seeing someone else take the leap forced him to finally name his real fear out loud to a friend.
Naming it is huge.
Right. He stopped talking about the economic climate and admitted he was terrified of being told he wasn't good enough. The research notes that just by articulating this specific fear, the amygdala's threat response began to downregulate, and he finally had the conversation with his boss.
Which is a huge win.
But reading Michael's story, I was left with a lingering question. What happens if you've been highly successful in the past? Let's say Michael gets the promotion and 3 years later wants to start his own firm. Does the fear of starting reset? Because you would think past success would make you immune to this paralysis.
This raises an important question, and it is a point of deep frustration for many high achievers. The psychological data is clear. Each new, meaningful goal activates the uncertainty response fresh.
Really?
Right.
You don't just graduate from it.
No, past success might give you better coping mechanisms over time, but it rarely removes the initial biological resistance. Having fear around a new start, even if you are an expert in your field, is not a sign of regression or weakness. It is just your brain doing its job of flagging the unknown.
So what does this all mean? We understand the biology of the amygdala, we have busted the myths about motivation, and we see how easily we can trick ourselves. How do we practically rewire our approach to break free?
Well, the sources outline a lot of strategies, but looking at them, they really cluster into 3 main areas: physical preparation, psychological reframing, and environmental design.
Let's start with the physical,
Yeah.
because it dictates your baseline neurological resilience. The sources highlight that poor sleep quality directly hypersensitizes the amygdala.
It is a massive factor.
A sleep-deprived brain is objectively worse at distinguishing between a minor inconvenience and a major threat. So if you're exhausted, your brain is vastly more likely to label a new opportunity as dangerous and default to waiting.
Yeah, and the nutritional data amazed me too. They link diets high in refined sugars to sharp energy crashes, which directly correlate to a drop in willpower and executive function.
Makes sense.
When your prefrontal cortex, the logical part of your brain, is starved for stable energy, I'll just start tomorrow feels like the only reasonable survivable option. Stable blood sugar and hydration literally create the physiological clarity needed to override the wait and watch impulse.
Once the physical foundation is stable, you can tackle the psychological reframing. And the most powerful tool here is the one Sarah used, setting a decision deadline, rather than a start deadline.
Which is a crucial distinction.
Walk me through the mechanics of why that works so well.
Yeah.
Because telling myself I have to decide by Friday doesn't sound that different from I have to start by Friday.
It sounds similar, but neurologically, it is night and day. A start deadline demands immediate, high-stakes action, which spikes the threat response. A decision deadline separates the cognitive load of choosing from the emotional load of executing.
Oh, okay.
You are just promising yourself that by Friday at 5 p.m. you will make a binding yes or no choice. Am I doing this or am I officially dropping it? It removes the pressure of instant performance, which dramatically lowers your emotional resistance to simply looking at the problem.
It forces you to kill the background app. If you decide no, you at least get your mental battery back.
Exactly. You close the app.
Another huge psychological tool the sources emphasize is shrinking the first action until it feels almost embarrassingly small.
I love this one.
They highlight a woman named Jennifer who waited nearly 2 years to sign up for a professional certification course. She kept waiting until she felt ready to tackle a huge syllabus. To break the loop, she shrank the required action down to just filling out page 1 of the enrollment form, just her name and address. She told herself she didn't even have to submit it.
It is a brilliant bypass of the amygdala. The brain's resistance is proportional to how large and complex the first step feels, not the ultimate size of the goal.
So you just sneak past it.
By making the step embarrassingly small, it slips right under the threat detector's radar. And because of the dopamine mechanism we discussed earlier, completing that tiny step generates the neurochemical momentum to take the second step.
The final cluster of strategies revolves around environmental design. The research insists that we have to audit our physical and digital spaces for waiting cues.
What do they mean by that?
Well, if you have 20 open browser tabs full of unread research for your project, those aren't helping you prepare. They are physical reminders of an unfinished decision, keeping your threat response quietly activated in the background all day.
Oh, definitely. Consolidate that research, close the tabs, and when you do sit down to take that embarrassingly small first step, silence your notifications. You have to actively cut off the easy escape routes to cheap dopamine, or your brain will take them the second it feels friction.
I want to circle back to something that underpins all of this, because it is the core truth of the research. It's the realization that the people who seem the absolute most ready when they finally take a huge leap, the people we admire for their timing, they were rarely actually ready. They were simply willing to act without readiness.
That is the ultimate takeaway. The wait and watch mistake is a master illusionist. It convinces you that one more piece of data, one more calm week, or one more burst of confidence will finally make starting feel safe.
But it won't.
Right. Safety isn't found in waiting. Momentum has to be built, clumsily and awkwardly, through small, imperfect, highly aware actions.
To you listening right now, remember that your growth isn't some magical destination you arrive at one day when the stars finally align and your brain gives you the green light. It is a direction. And it's a direction chosen through tiny, courageous choices that quietly add up.
The perfect readiness was never the missing ingredient. The willingness to tolerate the discomfort of an imperfect start was.
I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, thinking back to our diving board and that suitcase that never makes it to the airport. What if the relief you are constantly seeking isn't found in waiting for the perfect, safe moment, but in surviving the imperfect one?
That's a great perspective.
If your brain is wired to treat uncertainty as a physical threat, maybe the ultimate safety isn't avoiding the unknown. Maybe true safety is finally proving to yourself that you can step into the unknown and handle exactly what you find there. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll catch you next time.